The rain hammered against the windows of our cozy suburban home in Denver, mirroring the storm brewing inside me. I am Daniel, 47 years old, and until recently I thought I had it all. A loving wife, Emily, 43, a comfortable life and a future filled with shared dreams. Emily and I had been together for 18 years, married for 15. We met in college, two bright-eyed kids full of hope and ambition. She was an art student, vibrant and free-spirited, and I was studying engineering, grounded and practical. We balanced each other perfectly, or so I thought. Our life wasn't always easy. We had our share of struggles like any couple. There were financial worries when we were first starting out, disagreements about how to raise our two kids, and the everyday stresses of balancing work and family. But through it all, we always had each other. We were a team, partners in life, and I never doubted her love or loyalty. That was until about 6 months ago. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly. Emily began spending more time on her phone, often late into the night. She would quickly minimize the screen whenever I entered the room, a nervous habit that set off alarm bells in my head. Our conversations became shorter, less frequent, and devoid of the usual warmth and intimacy. She seemed distant, preoccupied, and increasingly irritable. At first, I dismissed it as stress. Emily had recently taken on a new project at work, a demanding commission that required long hours and intense focus. I figured she was just tired and overwhelmed, and I tried to be understanding and supportive. I cooked dinner more often, took over some of the household chores, and made an effort to give her space when she needed it. But as the weeks turned into months, her behavior only worsened. She started going out more often with her friends from work, always vaguely defined and never introduced. She would come home late, smelling of perfume and alcohol, with flimsy excuses about after-work drinks or team-building exercises. I tried to talk to her about it to express my concerns, but she would brush me off, accusing me of being controlling and insecure. "Don't trust me, do you?" she would say, her voice dripping with indignation. "After all these years, you still don't trust me, of course." I trusted her, or at least I wanted to. I loved her, and the thought of her betraying me was unbearable. So I pushed my suspicions aside, telling myself that I was being paranoid, that I was letting my insecurities get the better of me. Then came the business trip to Chicago. Emily was supposed to be gone for 3 days, attending a conference for her art collective. I offered to drive her to the airport, but she insisted on taking an Uber. "It's easier," she said, avoiding my gaze. "I don't want you to have to worry about parking and traffic." I kissed her goodbye, told her to have a good trip, and watched as she walked out the door, a knot of unease tightening in my stomach. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that she was hiding something from me. The first day went by without incident. I texted her a few times, asking how the conference was going, and she responded with short, generic messages. "It's fine," she wrote. Lots of interesting speakers. Tired. That evening, after putting the kids to bed, I found myself restless and unable to sleep. I wandered into the living room, picked up my laptop, and started idly browsing the internet. I don't know what possessed me to do it, but I suddenly had the urge to check Emily's flight information. I knew her flight number, so I typed it into Google and waited for the results. What I saw next sent a jolt of ice through my veins. According to the flight tracker, Emily's flight had been delayed by several hours due to severe weather in Chicago. It wasn't scheduled to arrive until late the following morning. I stared at the screen in disbelief, my mind racing. If Emily's flight was delayed, then where was she? Why hadn't she told me? A wave of nausea washed over me as the pieces of the puzzle started to fall into place. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the vague excuses, the business trip, it all pointed to one horrifying conclusion. Emily was cheating on me. I spent the rest of the night in a state of shock and denial, pacing the floor, replaying every moment of the past few months in my head. I couldn't believe it. My Emily, the woman I loved, the mother of my children, was having an affair. It felt like a knife twisting in my gut. As dawn approached, I made a decision. I couldn't sit around and wait for Emily to come home and lie to my face. I needed to know the truth, and I needed to know it now. I called my boss, told him I was taking a personal day, and booked the first flight to Chicago. I didn't have a plan, just a desperate need to confront Emily and find out what was going on. The flight was a blur. I sat in my seat, staring blankly out the window, my mind consumed by images of Emily with another man. The anger and betrayal were overwhelming, but beneath it all there was a deep, aching sadness. I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was undeniable. When I arrived in Chicago, I took a taxi to the hotel where Emily was supposed to be staying. I walked into the lobby, approached the front desk, and asked if Emily was checked in. The clerk typed her name into the computer and then looked up at me with a polite smile. "Yes, Mrs. Carter is checked in," she said. Room 312, my heart pounded in my chest as I thanked her and made my way to the elevators. I rode up to the third floor, my hands shaking, my palms sweating. I walked down the hallway, my footsteps echoing in the silence. Until I reached room 312, I stood outside the door for a moment, gathering my courage, trying to prepare myself for what I was about to do. I took a deep breath, raised my hand, and knocked. The door opened a few seconds later, and there stood Emily, wearing a silk robe, her hair tousled, her face flushed. Her eyes widened in shock when she saw me. "Daniel," she exclaimed, her voice a mixture of surprise and panic. "What are you doing here?" Before I could answer, a man appeared behind her, his eyes narrowed, his expression hostile. He was tall, muscular, and handsome, with a cocky smirk on his face. I recognized him instantly. It was Michael, one of Emily's friends from work, the one she had mentioned most often in the past few months. "The hell is this?" Michael demanded, stepping forward, his fists clenched. "I'm her husband," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "And I think it's time you two explain what's going on here." Emily's face turned pale. "Daniel, please," she stammered. "It's not what you think." "Oh, really?" I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Then why don't you tell me what it is, Emily? Tell me why you're in a hotel room in Chicago with another man when you're supposed to be at a conference." Emily's eyes darted back and forth between me and Michael, her mind clearly racing to come up with an explanation. But there was no explanation, no excuse that could justify what she had done. "Okay, fine," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's true. Michael and we've been seeing each other." Words hit me like a physical blow. I felt my world collapsing around me, the foundation of my life crumbling to dust. I had given Emily everything, my love, my trust, my loyalty, and she had repaid me with betrayal and deceit. "How could you do this to me, Emily?" I said, my voice choked with emotion. "How could you do this to our family?" "I don't know," she sobbed, tears streaming down her face. "I am so sorry, Daniel. It just happened. I didn't mean for it to go this far. It just happened," I repeated, my voice rising in anger. "You didn't mean for it to go this far. You've been lying to me for months, sneaking around behind my back, and you expect me to believe that it just happened." Michael stepped forward again, his expression defiant. "Look, buddy," he said, "it's not Emily's fault. She deserves to be happy, and you weren't making her happy." I turned to face him, my rage reaching a boiling point. "You stay out of this," I said, my voice low and menacing. "This is between me and my wife." "Not your wife anymore," Michael retorted, his eyes flashing with anger. "She's with me now." That was the last straw. I lunged at him, grabbing him by the collar, and slammed him against the wall. He cried out in pain, his hands flying up to defend himself. Emily screamed, trying to pull me off him, but I was beyond reason. I unleashed all my anger and frustration on Michael, punching him repeatedly in the face until he collapsed to the floor, bleeding and unconscious. I stood there for a moment, panting, my knuckles bruised and bloody, staring down at Michael's lifeless body. The adrenaline was pumping through my veins, but beneath it all, I felt a deep sense of emptiness and despair. I turned to Emily, who was cowering in the corner, her face pale with fear. "I am done," I said, my voice flat and emotionless. "I am done with you. I am done with this marriage. I want a divorce." I walked out of the hotel room, leaving Emily sobbing on the floor, and made my way back to the airport. I didn't look back. The next few months were a living hell. The divorce was messy and acrimonious, with Emily trying to paint me as an abusive and unstable husband. She hired a high-powered lawyer and demanded a large settlement, claiming that I had ruined her life. I fought back, of course, but the legal battle took a heavy toll on me, both emotionally and financially. I lost sleep, I lost weight, and I lost faith in humanity. I couldn't believe that the woman I had loved and trusted could be so cruel and vindictive. In the end, we reached a settlement. I gave Emily a fair amount of money, enough to allow her to start a new life, but not enough to make her rich. I also agreed to share custody of our children, although I knew that it would be difficult to co-parent with her. After the divorce was finalized, I moved out of our house and into a small apartment in the city. I started seeing a therapist to deal with the emotional trauma of the betrayal, and I tried to focus on rebuilding my life. It wasn't easy. There were days when I felt like giving up, when the pain and loneliness were overwhelming. But I knew that I had to keep going for the sake of my children and for my own sake. As time went on, the pain began to subside. I started to heal, to forgive, and to move on. I realized that Emily's betrayal was not a reflection of my worth as a person, but a reflection of her own character flaws. I also realized that I deserved better, that I deserved to be with someone who loved and respected me, someone who was loyal and trustworthy. One day, about a year after the divorce, I was at a coffee shop, reading a book, when I noticed a woman sitting at the next table. She was beautiful, with kind eyes and a warm smile. We struck up a conversation, and I found myself drawn to her intelligence, her humor, and her genuine compassion. Her name was Sarah, 39, and she was a recently divorced teacher. We talked for hours that day, sharing our stories, our hopes, and our dreams. We discovered that we had a lot in common, and we felt an instant connection. We started dating, and our relationship blossomed quickly. Sarah was everything that Emily wasn't: honest, supportive, and loving. She made me feel valued, appreciated, and cherished. She helped me to heal the wounds of the past and to look forward to the future with hope and optimism. After a year of dating, I knew that Sarah was the one. I proposed to her on a beautiful spring day in the park, and she said yes. We got married a few months later, in a small, intimate ceremony surrounded by our closest friends and family. It was the happiest day of my life. I had found love again, a love that was stronger, deeper, and more fulfilling than anything I had ever experienced before. I had learned from the pain of the past, and I was ready to embrace the joy of the future. As for Emily, I haven't seen or spoken to her since the divorce. I heard through mutual friends that she and Michael broke up shortly after I left, and that she was struggling to make ends meet. I don't feel any satisfaction in her misfortune, only sadness. I wish her well, but I have no desire to be a part of her life. I have moved on, and I am grateful for the second chance that life has given me. I am now married to a wonderful woman, I have a loving family, and I am living a life that is filled with happiness and purpose. The rain has stopped, and the sun is shining through the clouds. It's a new day, a new beginning, and I am ready to face it with a smile on my face and love in my heart. But the story doesn't end there. 3 years later, I received a call from an unknown number. Hesitantly, I answered. It was Emily. Her voice was weak, barely a whisper. She told me she was sick, very sick, and that Michael had left her years ago. She had no one. She asked if I could find it in my heart to forgive her and perhaps help her. My new wife, Sarah, stood beside me, listening. A wave of conflicting emotions washed over me: anger, resentment, but also a flicker of the old love and a deep sense of pity. I looked at Sarah, her eyes filled with understanding and compassion. We made a decision together. We wouldn't abandon her. We helped her find a good doctor and ensured she had a comfortable place to stay. It wasn't about rekindling anything, but about offering basic human kindness to someone in their darkest hour. Emily eventually passed away, knowing she wasn't alone and that she was forgiven. This experience taught me the true meaning of forgiveness and the importance of compassion, even towards those who have wronged us deeply.